Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. You can listen to Good Morning Comrade on goodmorningcomrade.com. Today on the show, we have Jeff and Robert. What's going on, Robert?
Sitting here. Don't want to be on camera because I'm just in sweatpants for everybody who's watching on Twitch.
I mean, I'm like that my sleeveless shirt showing off the huge, humongous 24-inch python. So I mean,
I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm trying to do gamer things. I'm trying to fix my HOTAS. I've got like two different HOTASes, but I'm trying to fix one because I want to play.
What's a HOTAS?
It's a hands-on throttle and stick. So I can play my space games. I like to pretend that there's a game called Rebel Galaxy Outlaw, which is, I think I've talked about before. It's the whole idea of it's like, what if the South was in space and you're just like a space trucker / bounty hunter, like do kind of whatever you want to be. Mm-hmm. Like, just to give you an idea of the vibe, there's anybody who's like Alabama, Louisiana, Texas kind of thing. There's a where you refuel your spaceship. There's a station where you refuel called Buckshots, and its logo is an armadillo with a shotgun. It's just Space Buckies.
Space Buckies.
So it's like, yeah, that's the vibe. It's really good. It's really relaxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Cool. We got a very special guest today. We got Jeremy on the show. What's going on, Jeremy?
Hey everybody, how you doing? Greetings from the Pacific Northwest. My name's Jeremy. I am another, I don't know what. I am actually, no, I will say this. I would say that I uphold a stereotype, but as opposed to being another like overly educated, underemployed, bespectacled, glasses wearing left podcaster with a slight speech impediment, and it's like, and you'll occasionally hear a cat in the background of my show. I am not a millennial. I am a Gen Xer. So take that, stereotype.
Oh, there you go. You were actually an iconoclast. Is what you are.
You got it. Yeah, I've been hosting a I guess you could, a podcast out of Portland, Oregon, since about mid 2016, called "Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person," where the original thing, which was originally started as just because I got so pissed off at how many quote unquote geek facing pop culture and like podcasts and YouTube shows were pretty much only about four things. And if you didn't want to talk about superheroes, zombies, video games, or I don't know what, vampires, I guess, whatever the fourth thing would be. Yeah,
the four things.
Yeah, the four things that are, of course,
have fun. Jeez.
Yeah, of course, the four things that are far less cool than the four pillars of hip hop. That so I started a podcast about people's personal obsessions, and when we originally started, I interviewed my friend who was the president of the Oregon Go chapter. We talked about the history of the game Go for about 2 hours, which wound up being like our most downloaded episode from, just it's weird to see hundreds of people downloading it from like South Korea, for example. And then as 2016 went along and a lot of us radicalized a little bit more, once 2017 hit, and then we just said, okay, heck with it. We're going a lot more leftist stuff in here. And I joined DSA, and a couple of my co-hosts were also in DSA. And so we started mixing in a lot more like pop culture and leftist content. So the tagline for my show I call now is socialism and Simpsons quotes, Posadism and pro wrestling.
Yes, we love pro wrestling.
Yeah, just to even though I think we barely talk about it anymore, but it's more. We've definitely had multiple episodes where I talked to Ian Williams, who had that Vice column on.
Ian's a good dude. Ian's a very good boy.
He talked to us about for 2 hours about everything from Dusty Rhodes to how much he loved The Witcher 3 because he so wanted, like, he just realized he loved that daddy-daughter relationship where he's like, oh, one day my daughter gets turns out like Garrett, where she goes out and like just slays people across the continent and goes off and either in just kind of like humps her way through or fights her way through all sorts of problems. And then going back to talking about like Dusty Rhodes as leftist hero, but also the
a working class hero. I mean, that
Yeah.
Hard Times promo is absolutely brilliant. I mean, we've
Hard times, Dad.
on the promo on the show where he talks about, you know, just basically being the son of a plumber, you know, like coming up from the hard times, you know, the whole thing is it's just absolutely brilliant. You know, I wasn't expecting to go into this in this direction. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about wrestling. So, in terms of that, like, what about wrestling is important to you? And you know, what is appealing to you? What is entertaining to you? What is like beautiful about this ugly sport of two mostly men, not always anymore, thank God.
Not always, yeah.
You know, people like smashing one another across the face with a steel chair. You know, why is that a beautiful thing? Why is that an art? Why is that a medium by which a story can be conveyed? It's actually incredible, right?
Yep. What I enjoy about it has changed over the years, much like with any, you know, kind of, I don't want to say maturing art form, but or maybe this is
It's developing, to be 100% clear. Like, wrestling is different than it was 10 years ago, than it was 20 years ago, than it was 30 years ago. It's constantly changing and developing.
Mm-hmm. I grew up in the classic era where I think the first WrestleMania I ever saw was WrestleMania 2. And
in the multiple locations.
Oh yes, and that was the first one we ever, because my dad was an early adopter of cable, so we had pay-per-views, and my father and all my uncle and all of my relatives were big pro wrestling fans. My uncle Gene was a referee down at the IMA in Flint, Michigan.
What?
He would do everything from boxing matches to pro wrestling, and my dad would tell me stories about when he was a kid. Oh, hello, cat. When he was a kid in oh, hello, cat butt. When he was a kid in Flint during the mid-50s, how he and great grandma Cossett would go down to the Saturday morning matches, and all of the workers knew, do not go over to that corner, because they would sit on like a corner up by the ring. They do not go over that corner there, because that woman there with her big hat and her umbrella, let's just say wrestling was still real to her, and she was a big enough mark that she was ready to let those heels have it with her umbrella. And my uncle Gene would referee matches. In fact, he would even show up on sometimes in, like, I think there's some still like 70s archival pro wrestling you can see from around Michigan, where there's this kind of tall, bald-haired guy named Gene is the ref. So I grew up watching this stuff in like the in the mid '80s era. Definitely. Yeah, definitely during golden era Hulkamania, where it's the kind of thing where, like, I mean, we would stay up to watch Saturday night's main event years before I started watching SNL.
Yeah, it was just like appointment television. Like, it is it is an event. It is a show. It is a spectacle. It is the goddamn circus.
Yeah,
that's like happening when these two, you know, gorilla dudes are like gonna punch one another in the face. Or sometimes even better, you'll get the genius to come in his graduation robe and cap to like sing a song and like rap some quick poetry and like introduce Mr. Perfect, you know, like something like that.
Lanny Poffo, who
Randy Savage's brother, absolute my favorite wrestler of all time, by the way, is Randy Savage.
Yeah, my brothers as well. In fact, my younger brother and his friends, they were about 2.5, 3 years younger than me, and they we're going all over the place. It's like, this is extremely out of. Well, first, Lanny Poffo, when he was still a face, when he would read off his poems and then would throw out frisbees to the audience, which is just such a hilariously
Leaping Lanny.
Yeah, Leaping Lanny Poffo, which is just like this hilariously just. I don't know if it's a sort of like Southern gimmick but it's just like minor league wrestling gimmick of like, yeah, your face tosses out free frisbees as a way to get support from the audience. But I can remember my brothers who were my brother and his football playing friends who were much bigger fans. When they got back after their dark era, kind of, you know, their dark years were kind of shorter than mine. So when they got back into it during the Attitude Era, that was when backyard wrestling was a thing. And I can remember when they were old, my brother and all of his college football playing buddies were in undergrad, and they had a video camera, and so they would do things like they would gimmick a table, and they would like film themselves like power bombing each other through tables. But
That's incredible.
I think, but the importance of one of the main things that I think about, and we can get into Roland Barthes' episode, commentary about this too, about just the nature of I see a bearded. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I messaged my friend I'm gonna be on, and my friend messaged back. He's like, "Okay, are you on this? I see a bearded dude with music playing." I'm like, "It's probably that's one of us." I think the important thing to take from pro wrestling now is the idea of kayfabe, and I didn't know, wasn't sure if this was going to remain true after Trump got out of office. But I can remember in the episode we recorded with Ian Williams was talking about how you needed to understand kayfabe to understand modern American politics, but also you could understand Trump by what Vince did, and you could understand Vince by what Trump did, because both Trump and Vince were both, the heirs to this fortune that was, built in the mid 20th century. They were both kids, sons and inheritors of very abusive, like emotionally effed up, business tycoons. Yeah, and then they inherit this throne. Trump starts doing business in the 70s, and Vince starts getting control of the WWF in the mid 70s, and they both have to establish themselves as legitimate operators of their own in 80s Manhattan. Although Vince pulled out to Stanford, and so it's kind of like, I think they were always simpatico forever, which is why. And what you mean, Trump was always, the big casino guy, and Vince was always the big carny guy. So of course they got a lot. I mean, what WrestleMania 4 was the first one held at a Trump casino,
a Trump hotel, a Trump property. I remember that. Yeah,
and so it's kind of a thing of like understand. And then even so now we are. Trump is not currently they're not currently letting him occupy the White House, shall we say, but understanding how kayfabe work and how heels and faces work to people is extremely I don't know if it's the most important thing, but it is fundamental knowledge for understanding American politics.
No, I mean, you look at like a freak like Kristen Sinema, and she's straight out of like 80s. She's like her and like Sherry Martel.
Yeah,
could be
sensational
like,
Sherry.
It's absolutely like she's a freak. She's a weirdo, and she plays it up. Like she plays it up for the booze, which I don't understand. I honestly don't understand. But in her mind, like this logically like works for her. I don't know.
Yeah, I think someone once said like the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is just boredom. Is just kind of like is nothing. And Jake the Snake would talk about how like heat is heat, and he would do what he could do. Is like at one point when you were so, I think either Jake said this or maybe Roddy Piper said this in his biography. Also, one fun thing about living in Portland, turns out Roddy Piper is
Portland.
Yeah. In before in the last years of his life, he owned an auto garage way over in Beaverton, which is the on like a little city to 5 miles west of Portland. But he talked about how you were connecting with the audience, not when they were cheering, not just when they were cheering for you, but and especially with Jake the Snake, they mothers in the audience would throw soiled diapers at the ring to try to hit him. And like that's what he knew that he was connecting it, and it's the whole like cinema and mansion thing is makes a lot more sense when you realize that they are playing a role for the camera, and that and that they get being in like this almost like Ric Flair or even let's say a slightly newer. Maybe even Trish Stratus. How about that kind of a sense of like being able to to absorb the and kind of thriving off of the audience's ire, because at least that
kind of like drink in the hatred.
Yeah,
You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have Jeff and Robert on the show with Jeremy from Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. We're surprisingly talking about wrestling, which is good. I'm enjoying this little way that we're kind of going about things. But yeah, we're talking a little bit about how you can sort of like look at wrestling as like a vector for like the way you look at politics. And like, yeah, there is a certain amount of like kayfabe that goes about it. Like the idea that somebody like Kirsten Sinema is like playing things up for the boos and for the, you know, for the haters, and just to kind of get a reaction, to kind of up her response. I mean, we all saw the memes when they had that picture of her like clutching on to like whoever the hell that, you know, Republican guy was, like talking about, this is why we can't ever possibly do an infrastructure bill that would like prevent people from being evicted from their homes right tomorrow. This is why we can't do that. Yeah. And like, you know, like the whole point of that was to become like the story or the headline or the attention seeker or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, should we define kayfabe for the?
Define kayfabe for the normies.
Do you want to, or should I?
Go for it.
Kayfabe, for my limited understanding, kayfabe, because pro wrestling is 100% of. What do you want, Kat? Is 100% of carny origins, and so when you understand that in terms of like. About how this was like this literal sideshow act to, you know, to get to soak the marks for money. Kayfabe was a way of having everybody, you know, in on it, talk to each other in a language that the mark, you know, the punter in the audience wasn't aware of.
Yeah, just going with the bit, essentially.
Yeah, going with the bit and never breaking character.
Correct.
But it's kind of like it is. You know, it's a way in a language of maintaining in-universe, not just continuity.
Continuity, yeah, that's what it is. Kayfabe is essentially universe-based continuity. You want to like, you don't want to do like a, you know, you don't want to breach that reality that you're constructing when you're telling that story, right? You want to make sure that you're keeping that illusion complete.
Although, and it is amusing that even though pro wrestling was better at maintaining it for decades, you would still have, you know, break through when, say, Hacksaw Jim Duggan got arrested with the Iron Sheik for possession because they were driving between, I can't remember, I think this was somewhere either in the Midwest or in the North. They're driving between towns on the way to the next match. They get pulled over and they were all like, you know, had more than a little bit of marijuana on them, and you know, I think Vince had to do whatever he could to quash that in the press so that no one could, they couldn't do what you could call breaking kayfabe. Mm-hmm. Also, I always thought that kayfabe was a derivation of fake. They just switched the consonants.
It was carny talk in a lot of ways, but and again, they would go to extreme lengths to prevent like breaking of kayfabe, especially in like the 1980s. Do you remember the David Schultz John Stossel incident?
Oh, Dr. Death, David Schultz, Dr. Death, which was that actually 1980 or was that 1978?
It was in the 1980s or the 1970s. It was a long time ago, but essentially John Stossel comes out and he says, "I think wrestling's fake," and this wrestling dude just fucking slaps him upside the head. And he's like, "Does that feel fake to you?"
It ruptured Stossel's eardrum, I think. What do you mean? It actually
happened to a nicer guy, by the way.
Oh yeah. It's speaking of 70s dark-haired TV dudes with interesting pasts that wound up later on Fox News. If you ever get a chance, go back and watch, because the archive tapes are on YouTube. Go watch the reports that Geraldo Rivera was doing for ABC back in the 70s. He was doing something where he would had just glorious long 70s hair and would be like interviewing Muhammad Ali in like 1974. Anyway, but in terms of maintaining kayfabe, like I think Vince,
Ali, by the way, maintained kayfabe like none other.
Yeah,
like even though like boxing was real, like he knew how to hold a feud. Like he knew how to do a PR feud.
Oh yeah, this was he at a certain point. Yeah, it's kind of like you need to. He was really much about holding up the narrative,
the story, Yeah,
so that no one actually broke character or anything like that, and he was able to sell it too. Mm-hmm. But in terms of breaking character, and I think it was like Vince and the other execs told the David Dr. Death to actually go out and do this, and I think even like kind of like used him as a bit of a fall guy when so much like they got a lot of bad as a childhood buddy of mine would say, there's no such thing as bad publicity as long as they spell your name right. David, he got all this heat for doing this stuff, but it's one of those things where, hey, Vince just kept laughing because it got eyeballs, as we would now describe it. So,
which is what matters. Like, there's no press is bad press, right? That kind of thing.
Indeed, yeah.
So who's your favorite wrestler of all time? What's your favorite sort of like period of wrestling and that whole thing? And why? Because I grew up in the I grew up in the 90s. I was I'm born in 84. And like there was nothing like the Attitude Era. I mean, that was like the craziest stuff that I'd ever seen in my entire life. When you had like it was not just the Attitude Era. Like you would have like the WCW Monday Nitro, like that whole sort of
Nitro versus Raw, yeah,
and then the Raw thing. But then I don't know, there was just a complete and utter implosion by WCW. Which that whole story, by the way, like the way that it was written is very obviously and clearly been like post hoc reconstructed by the like WWE. Like moralizing and saying that, you see, this is what happens when the workers get too much power inside of wrestling. What I mean?
Says the company says the folks that made Hulk Hogan,
right? The most authoritarian of all, though.
Although that's the interesting thing is like even I think even Ric Flair talked about how you could have wrestlers booking things, but you couldn't have them both book write these shows and like figure out their own storylines, but also wrestle them, because it's kind of like 90s WCWs, we saw what the result of that was, where like certain superstars came over from WWF, paid, because they had Time Warner. Turner was, I think, either merged with or owned by Time Warner at that point, and so they had crazy money just to throw at this stuff. Yeah. And but I mean, as for my favorites. My favorite wrestler, it varied by the years. Like when I was a kid in the 80s classic era, I think I was a big Hulk Hogan fan, but and then eventually morphed into being more of a fan of George the Animal Steele, and especially Roddy Piper. I think for a while, like Roddy Piper was my favorite wrestler because he was just this complete smartass, and I think at some point, in like adolescent me, like,
Piper's kid was just like revolutionary, right? The idea that he would like bring in somebody and just like talk absolute garbage to them, and then like either like beat them up himself or have him like just find like Hogan and like Andre the Giant and be like, okay, I'm gonna start stuff between y'all and y'all are gonna get mad because I'm instigating the whole thing. Just absolute brilliant. The guy was a weirdo, and like he definitely did some questionable stuff, but in terms of gathering heat, absolute genius.
Oh yeah, and like I said, if you get a chance to read his autobiography, and there's a lot of like wrestling. Once Mick Foley realized you could make a heck of a lot of money. Yeah, just to kill it with their own books, and so WWE started churning out these books, and a lot of them were like you can't really tell. Well, they're like very obviously ghost written, or at least ghost assisted. Roddy Piper is very clearly written by him in his voice, with some of his TBI kind of occasionally manifesting. Mm-hmm. I drifted away from wrestling about 91, 92, because I think by that point I had a modem, and I was far more into like computer games and calling up BBSs and just into other stuff. And it wasn't really until I can remember I went to went to undergrad, and once in a while, like on a Saturday night, you'd flip around and then you'd see like WCW Saturday night, and just kind of like, oh, that's how cute. That's kind of fun. And then flip past it.
How novel.
Yeah, how novel. It's like, oh, okay, who knows that was still on? And it wasn't really until, again, the Attitude Era, which for those in the audience who don't know, Attitude Era is what they call, think the NWO and Steve Austin. If you think of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, when they really kind of became the heavyweights.
It was the golden age of parent pearl clutching. Of like, oh, we have violent video games. Oh, we have like scary music, and oh, we have like violent wrestling. Like it was just like, like that was basically the whole point of the Attitude Era, was to freak out the squares, man, in like the most 90s way possible.
God, and Joe Lieberman wanting to censor first Mortal Kombat home console game because of they freaked out when a fatality when you'd punch a guy and 6 rib cages would fly out in really bad pixelated sprites.
And don't forget that Hillary Clinton took the bait on that. Like,
oh yes,
Hillary Clinton was a huge warrior for that, and also Tipper Gore was huge on the parental advisory, like
PMRC, Parents Music Resource Council or something like that. Which that was the PMRC stuff happened just at the very beginning of my consciousness of pop culture, because I remember it would be occasionally would pop up on MTV. I think I would be like 8 or 9, and I would like it would occasionally pop up on MTV. The very little I would watch that, or it would pop up on like you'd see it mentioned on, because I watched Nickelodeon all the time, and they had their music video show was called Nick Rocks, which was great, and that's how my early introduction to a lot of music, and it would occasionally pop up on there. But during that era, and that was again, my younger brother and all his friends got back into wrestling, but I was on campus. I think I lived in Ann Arbor, went down there to go to engineering school in like 94, and I was an undergrad for 6 years because I double majored, which was such a great idea. And I got a job at at this kind of like meat market sports bar on campus, which I found out later. Talk about wrestling, the Steiner brothers, who were both University of Michigan wrestling, varsity wrestling champions,
Hall of Famers,
Hall of Famers, both briefly worked at that bar as bouncers, 10 or 15 years earlier.
Could you imagine like getting on the wrong side of those dudes at the bar?
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm sure they were terrific bouncers.
Yeah, and so I was working at this bar because I needed like a summer. I had lost my job as a computer lab help guy, and I needed a summer job. And I'm like, okay, well here we watch Red Wings games here, and this was like when the Red Wings were very dominant. I'm like, okay, well they need help for summer help. And I'm like, okay, I'll get a job here as a cook, and worked and eventually started being a bar back there. The guys are both the managers and a lot of the other workers were like really big wrestling fans, and I can remember like hanging out and talking to them, and they'd want to like, here, check this out, Karl Malone and Diamond Dallas Page are wrestling a couple other guys on this pay-per-view. It's kind of fun to see. And it wasn't really until I think during a snowstorm,
Dennis
Rodman, yep. It wasn't really until a snowstorm in early '99 we were stuck inside, so I just clicked on like Nitro one night, and I heard Bobby the Brain Heenan's voice. I'm like, okay, I remember this voice, and Bobby the Brain was great because he was just like, again, just completely would rip on people, and so I started watching it again, and then I started getting into all of the pro wrestling, all of this, the pro wrestling smart mark online stuff. The amount of like what wrestling websites out there were just legion, and they were all
they're made as bones.
Yeah, and it was all like, if anybody remembers GeoCity and Angel Fire, GeoCities, and they were all almost all of these wrestling fan pages, almost to a single one, unless they had a lot of money behind them, were all worse than your average Angel Fire production. But I can remember for like the last year or two when I was in undergrad, I would I would tape the had my little like VCR, and I would tape the Monday night shows, and whatever show I didn't watch, I would download the recaps and like get bored in class, and so I print them out in the computer labs, and I just read recaps of the previous night shows forever. And then in that era, that era, my favorite wrestler was definitely Eddie Guerrero.
Oh my god, absolute king.
Did I have like a fever dream in the 90s, or was there a thing where there was almost like a live, not live action, but it was like what would you call it? Like an not alternate reality, but one of those like reality-based games that people would play. But the whole idea of it was, I can't think of it, but it was you would create a wrestler, or you would like take the persona of a wrestler, and you'd be like, oh, The Rock is going to wrestle Stone Cold. So one guy in the message board would be like The Rock, and the other guy would be, say, Stone Cold. And they would write promos, and then the people who they would write like promos, and the people on the message boards would read them. And whoever had the better promo, like people would vote, and that person would win. So you'd have like win-losses and like a legit champ of like this weird message board wrestling. Did I dream that? Was that a thing that happened?
That sounds like the smack off for Jim Rome.
Kinda.
Yeah. Well, that is I mean, given I think a lot of this. I mean, this actually sounds like something that would come out, that would spin out of like America on the boards on America Online.
Yeah, 100%.
That was that was
that you would have like somebody saying like, I'm Frieza and you're Goku and I'm gonna fight you, and you have to just like type the words out.
I never participated in it, but like I had a buddy who did, and I'm like, dude, this is the worst way to spend a Saturday night I can ever imagine. I was like, you know that pornography is on the internet, right? And it's free. Like, my dude, like we're living past the days of even like dialers that would dial your parents' phone to like Cuba or something and charge them like $1 million. Like, you can just look at the porno.
Well, you are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. We have Jeff and Robert, and we also have our friend Jeremy from Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person podcast. Go ahead, Jeremy.
The radio station, what, WHL, was it HLVLP?
WHIVLP New Orleans. Kind of like the director of our station, founder, is an infectious disease doctor who does a lot of work around HIV. So that's where the name comes from.
Gotcha. WHIVLP at 102.7 FM, isn't it?
102.3.
102.3 FM.
You can also listen online, WHIVFM.org/listen.
Excellent, rock and roll. And I can still switch into radio voice once in a while. God, I'm trying to remember. In fact, I was doing college radio by that point, and we would find the old like WWF compiled theme songs, and we would occasionally play some theme songs, and because we were at a freeform station, and so me and once in a while, like I'd have my idiot drunken buddy in there, and we'd occasionally like mix in like pro wrestler themes into like, all right, here's like a bunch, here's like a bunch of Husker Du, Rob Mold wrestling, another wrestling connection, a bunch of Husker Du and Dead Kennedys and stuff like the MC5, and then occasionally we would cut in stuff like songs from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and pro wrestling main themes. Mm-hmm. So that was the Attitude Era, and then I pretty much dropped out of I kind of like receded from pro wrestling again about probably in like 01, 02, like after they started doing all the invasion. They bought. I remember watching the last episode of Nitro where Shane O'Mac shows up, and they do it was a really weird weekend.
They actually had a great match between Sting and Ric Flair to finish out the entire series, which was nice. But the whole thing was a mess. Yep.
And then they had a great, it was like that era where they, of course, I think CM Punk said something about, described Vince McMahon as a millionaire who should be a billionaire, and a lot of his like screwy decisions over the years have kind of like really evidence that, like, the stuff of like where his ego or really bad ideas or whatever would get in the way of like just letting the people who knew what they were doing actually do their jobs.
Yeah, but in like any just world, he would have just been like any other fail son, right? Of just like any other rich guy. But like the fact that you like live in this hell of America, that like you basically wealth just begets wealth. And so it's like an infinite like repeating like cycle.
Yeah, and not just that, but also Vince starts up business early on with this guy who would later become president, and you get to the point where in wrestling becomes big enough again that both presidential candidates in 2008 both record promos to play at it was either on Raw or on the pay-per-view. So. And then later, the wife of the CEO. Actually, no, I think Linda might be the CEO.
I think she's a CFO, or she's one of these C-suite like name, title, whatever's. But like she's. I think Vince is like the president, and she might be the CEO. I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
But you have Vince's wife Linda. Getting a spot in the Trump administration as in the small business administration
after
office.
Running for Senate and losing, by the way.
Right. If you get anybody in the audience want a fun little fact, I believe Linda ran for Senate in it would be Connecticut, wouldn't it? Yep. Search the campaign mailer that her campaign sent out for her Senate campaign in 2012. There's a picture of her and of Barack Obama together on this mailer. Talking about how even though she was clearly running for the GOP slot, but she also knew who she was, who she had to aim for. So it was a campaign mailer with Obama portrayed in a positive light. It's just this great little, again, weird artifact of history, but also of both pro wrestling and of American politics.
Yeah, just a complete and utter mess, right? A complete and utter otherwise incomprehensible jumble of images,
right?
But it makes sense in the particular context of the state of Connecticut.
Yep.
In 2018 or whatever year it was.
2012.
It was 2012. Really? Was it that long?
Her first.
Yeah,
her first campaign was 2012. But it's also, I think, again, these are I don't know, essential truths that pro wrestling fandom can impart wisdom. Like, say, not just that, as the great Ted DiBiase once said, every man has his price, but also more of a sense of never say never. And any amount of money will eventually, not just that, but it's any amount of money will eventually overcome the most bitter feud and refusal of people to work together. Like, for example, had Macho Man Randy Savage not had his unfortunate ending, even though his extremely problematic history with the McMahon family would not have prevented if Vince smelled money, he would have brought him back, because they brought back Hogan and they brought back Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah. If you can make a buck, you all these personal problems and whatever issues you have kind of get pushed to one side, because we got business to do here, folks. We're on a business here.
Yeah, we got money to make. You know, no matter what happens, we got money to make. And no, I'm just flashing back to the first. I think it was the first WrestleMania that we ever saw live on pay-per-view, where it was we actually got like my dad ordered it, so me and my brother were there, and all of our neighbor friends, our next door neighbors would come over, both adults and kids. We'd all cram into our 10, 12 people crammed into our basement to watch WrestleMania 3. Which was being held at the Pontiac Silverdome, which would have been about an hour.
People were literally hanging from the ceiling, or hanging from the rafters. If you're asking people, Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh yeah, and one of these days, I want somebody I hope somebody has gone back through to the talk about epistemic limits and found out exactly how heavily papered that show was. How many thousand free tickets did they have to give out to just stock that place full? Because the Pontiac Silverdome was where the Detroit Lions played, just outside of Detroit, about an hour southeast of my hometown of Flint. Mm-hmm. And but I just remember watching that, and I was like, all right, this is here. And for some reason, they brought a pre-rehab Alice Cooper to come, like, accompany Jake the Snake Roberts to the ring, and all sorts of other, just crazy stuff.
Yeah. So you're from Flint. That's interesting. So I guess, obviously there's to like change gears like dramatically, I guess you could say. Like, do you still have family out there?
Most of my, I think most of my family, for a while, my aunt still lived right outside of Flint, but most of my immediate family is, split to the four winds. My parents retired. My parents wanted to get the heck out of Michigan for obvious reasons, but they still wanted seasons. So instead of retiring to Florida, they went halfway, and they're now in right outside of Knoxville. Knoxville, of course, in Knox County, current mayor one Glenn Jacobs.
Yeah.
Isaac
That's
Yankum.
Kane.
Yeah, Dr. Isaac Yankum, DDS.
A friend of ours up here is actually one of the co-chairs of DSA in New Orleans, is from Knox County. But anyway, that actually brings a good transition to DSA. But after this station ID, you're listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade, goodmorningcomrade.com. So you're a delegate to the DSA National Convention, and one of the ways that we hooked up was actually, even though I didn't realize that you were also on the Michael Brooks Show servers as well, but we kind of hooked up on one of the Slack channels and convention. So I guess I wanted to kind of get your take on what is going on with this convention, how you feeling, what's up with it so far, and what do you expect going forward?
Let's just say this was my second convention. My first one was 2019 down in Atlanta.
You are still waiting for the elevator, I think, right?
Yep, still waiting for the elevator. Atlanta, again, all these pro wrestling connections are Atlanta. Former headquarters, it was Smyrna. WCW is located in Smyrna, which is one of the, much like, WWE is Stamford, WCW is in Smyrna, right outside of Atlanta. But yeah, that was my first.
Yeah, it's like basically Smyrna is where Turn is at. Yeah.
That 2019 convention, we had over 1,000 delegates crammed into a ballroom in this. I think it was like this wizard tower in downtown Atlanta, where I think I can understand why they did it, because they wanted a Union hotel that wasn't in Chicago yet again, and they were rumor had it they were looking at New Orleans, and all the New Orleans reps were like, no way in hell, do not come here. There is you do not want to do business with anybody here.
Okay. I can illuminate this because I was a part of some of these discussions, because I'm in DSA in New Orleans, right? And right. Part of the problem is with New Orleans is that if you hold a convention when you have you literally have DSA convention once every other year, like every 2 years, right? Yep. In New Orleans, and August is directly in the middle of hurricane season, like right smack in the middle. It starts in June, it ends in November, right? So like it's right directly in like the highest traffic part of hurricane season, which, like, look, you just don't want to do that without a contingency plan. We love conventions in New Orleans, but that's just not the best time of year,
Yeah, that's that I wouldn't be surprised. Although talk about giving everybody, giving all these delegates from across the country a nice little a nice little taste of life in the region, huh?
I would say this though. If we have this infrastructure set up for if we have the infrastructure set up for like this remote situation that we have now, let's try it out. And plan B is this.
Yeah. The one thing about the convention things that I've noticed.
Yeah. John 992 says the Fed would use the weather machine to get us out. It's true.
I'm sorry. I forgot you're on Twitch, which means you don't. Which means you. Wait, do we have? Oh, there is a comments window. Okay, cool. Sorry, I forgot. I don't use StreamYard that much. So anyway, but I think one of the for folks who don't know, this is this big convention of happens every couple of years. Last time was 2 years ago in a much more there was extremely more optimistic time. That was mid 2019 rather, versus now I don't know the benefits. I mean, yes, it's a huge logistical headache to get 1,001 people anywhere. Oh yeah, much less. Actually, let me close my door. To get 1,001 people, have them travel across the country. Not to mention, like, some of them flew in from Alaska and Honolulu and all that stuff, rather than just having everybody just pile into the van and road trip down to wherever. Mm-hmm. But having, I will say that experience there as complicated and dramatic and emotionally complex. There were plenty of great times there, and it was something where the parasocial became the social. Like, all of these people who you only knew you could, if you heard them talk on mic, you could recognize their voice because you listened to their podcast, or you knew them because you would meet people who you had seen through, like, on Twitter, or like I met and I talked to, like, hey, look, they're over there. There's Nathan Robinson from Current Affairs. Or
we love Nathan Robinson. We love Nathan here.
Yeah, I talked to him briefly to tell him to see if I could get some of his writers to come up on my podcast.
They followed us on Twitter. Damn it! Finally, God, it took forever.
Yeah. Or other stuff, like, at nights, you would have like convention stuff during the day, and at night you'd have like the much more social meetups, which I hope that there weren't a lot of options for people in recovery, but fortunately I wasn't. So, like, give me more beer. But being able to, like, go to, like, like the bars in kind of like the downtown area where you could, like, have a beer with, like, Alex Vitale, because, like, hey man, I'm stuck. I'm reading your book, but I'm kind of stuck in the middle of it. Just chatting with him, or meeting Eric Blanc again from talking about his book.
I heard things about that street fight / Antifada / Trillbilly show that was supposed to be a lot of fun.
I remember hearing about that, but I think that was so completely sold out by the time I got there that I never had a chance of getting a ticket. However, that weekend, I did get to meet. I think I met both Brett and Brian at one of the evening hangouts.
They're the best.
While we were there. Yeah. There was it was kind of like meeting people, like, all right, meeting Brace Belden. I'm like, oh, hey, and who's very much in real life like he is online, and just kind of chatting with him about stuff, even though he is shorter than you'd expect. But then again, everybody, I'm 6'1", so everybody's shorter than me. Or stuff like there was a night where where the Emerge caucus out of New York City, and like Jamie Peck of the Antifada organized this kind of party, which was there was a I think the name of the bar was called the
Church Show. By the way, Jamie Peck, we love Jamie.
Oh yes. There was I can't remember what the name of the bar is. I thought it was just called Church, but there's actually a bar in Atlanta, not too a couple spaces over from probably some of the best pizza that I'd ever had.
In Atlanta?
In Atlanta, yep. Best pizza I ever had. Cooked by in a flat crust pizza, cooked by a guy wearing a 90s Grant Hill Pistons, the teal and horsepower era Pistons jersey.
Incredible.
Which is a jersey I did not expect. Again, having lived in Michigan until 2004, I did not expect to see that jersey in Atlanta 17 years later. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so there was a bar there called Church, and there was a big, 2 stories. The upstairs had a couple of pool tables, and they would have little meetings there during the day, but they had karaoke, except that instead of a karaoke machine, you had a fellow there who would play a small church organ, and the songs in the songbook were pretty much all the songs that he knew. And so you would pick the song that you would want to sing, and he would play on his church organ and sing backup. And I remember Jamie, by that point, she had sang the only Pulp song they had on the list, so I had to go with the only Johnny Cash song they had that night. But it was again, I got to meet, I finally met Ben Burgess that night because after chatting with him, he'd been on my show for a little while, and he and his wife had moved to Atlanta briefly. It was a great time. Okay. Also, it was emotionally exhausting, and because the hotel, from what I heard, the hotel did not want to hire cooks to come and cook breakfast early, so they only served us cold stuff like pastries and fruit and like maybe things of like little things of cereal or yogurt. So you had a lot of people who didn't exactly have a good hearty breakfast to keep them through the emotional struggle of the day, and it got rough. Let me tell you that. Let me tell you something, Mean Gene. All right, so 2021 convention. At least this time, yeah, it is
very online. It's the most online convention you can ever imagine.
Yeah, the fun bit is that I was trying to count the number of platforms that you had to be logged into. You see, there was a Zoom login for a lot of stuff to watch, like the main stuff. There was a if you were on any Signal chats with people from either your chapter or other people you wanted to coordinate with or just chat with or whatever, there's a Slack channel. Not a Slack channel. There's a Slack server. Slack. Yeah, there's a
channels. It seems like
yeah. You have people like nattering back and forth on like the DSA Discord. People on kibitzing and arguing on Twitter. You had and there's too
many damn platforms.
Yeah, at one point you need to have like 6 I have 2 monitors here, which was very, very handy. So it was kind of like you throw a couple things here and a couple things there, and like, okay, now I can kind of like keep an eye on what's going on. And then like not to mention the main convention platform, which is the system called Cadence, which is actually pretty. I will say this: that is a pretty good system, but trying to coordinate, interaction. Yeah, trying to coordinate interactions and all the doings going on across 5 or 6 different platforms is a very singular experience. I'll say that.
What about the business of the convention, though? What do we think we're going to get out of that? What do you think are the big kind of questions that are going to be resolved kind of going into this convention? Because that's really, like, I don't know, the sort of debate in the broad strokes, not to say which side you're on or whatever, but like what are the big questions that you sense that are coming up?
I think there's everything from like trying to get people to support a move towards having more campaigns for, if not a national campaign for, say, universal childcare. There's one of the resolutions they're trying to push, and Portland leads the way. No, but Portland did have a successful. It helps if I pronounce things correctly. A successful petition drive and got a ballot measure on the November ballot last year for Multnomah County, which is where Portland is, to pretty much have subsidized. Actually, pretty much free child care at union wages for kids, 3 and 4. For the entire, and like that, where it was one of those things where we got like a lot of coalition built in. It was the one after all of the the kind of the crumbling of the Bernie campaign, as well as the other like local, because we had DSA candidates who were vying for both the House representative spot, but also a state representative spots, because after they, once pandemic hit and we couldn't, I don't know how it was down there, but we couldn't, you can't canvass in the middle of lockdown. So we lost our main tool for getting people. And so the universal preschool campaign became a thing where once we realized, after fighting with a couple of like local business groups who really didn't want their taxes, raised so that, those undeserving locals might get their kids, in a little bit better conditions. Once we learned, that big legal fight got out, and we learned how many. We ended up having to raise 30,000 signatures to get before, I think, like something like July, to get this ballot measure on there. And then the uprising happened, and we realized that we could go to these where people had, big meetups of like thousands of people. We could go there with clipboards and, hand sanitizer, and everybody had masks on and something. But you had just like thousands of people who were very, very, all down for the cause, and would sign up. And we ended up making, we successfully made. I think we got like over 2,000 extra signatures, submitted everything on it, got it on the ballot, and it passed by some overwhelming majority of like 70-odd%. So like, everybody was freaking on like election day last year. Everyone was freaking out, except we were like, hey, well, we knew immediately, because Portland has, Oregon has mail-in voting. We knew immediately that the one thing that we had focused all of our energies into passed overwhelmingly. So we had we had a nice little like election night party. And so I think one of the big things is trying to expand that to other chapters, other regions, because it is both something that needs to happen, because just to give working folks just at least a little bit room to breathe, because in plenty of places, childcare is as expensive, if not more expensive, than rent.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where we figured it is this great. Not only is it this necessary resource, if you really want to help the working class, and the working class is overwhelmingly single mothers, that's this, or at least there's
a large contingent of single mothers in the working class. That's not that's controversial.
Yeah, and I think that working, this is a good fight that you want to have. That it's I don't know if this is some sort of like Rosa Luxemburg thing, talking about how it is in the fight for these things that you gain capacity, that you gain energy from, to go on and keep pushing at it.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you don't burn out or don't become discouraged when things don't go your way. But I think as a bit of a critique towards DSA historically, and a lot of the tendencies are very, very electoral focused. I am not an anti-electoralist. I got plenty of anti-intellectual tendencies. What do you say? But as the great Michael Jamal Brooks once said, it's like you don't want to do no electoralism, but you want it to be like 5 or 10% of what you do.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we can do that, if we're instead of just, because I think we're Americans, we have such a very deliberately narrowed perspective on what politics actually is, that politics is only what politicians do. That it's just running candidates on a party line and getting into office, and then there you go. That's all you need to do. And it's like, no, that
ain't no accident either. That's an intentional depoliticization that takes place because of the way that the sort of ruling class dictates policy. I mean, essentially dictates policy. It makes it seem as though democracy doesn't matter.
Yeah,
that is intentionally designed to do that, right?
Oh yeah, and one of the other things that I think is interesting is, if you switch from focusing on candidates in a partisan race to, say, ballot measures, you can activate. It's like, because you're not going against even like local well-meaning Democrats. They don't see you as being in competition for these spots. They will much happily get involved with you, because Portland had just a ton of Bernie-crats who wanted to help out, Bernie PDX and the local Bernie PDX and Our Revolution. I think we're both coalition members in just our ballot drive. And so I think that's one of the things on the convention is try to, it's like, hey, we have, much like how in Kansas City, they have a lot of successful stories about tenant organizing. In Portland, we have this one model, at least. It's like, hey, this worked here in Portland. It might work where y'all are too, if as long as you I mean, you'll have to re-EQ it a little bit. You have to adjust the levels for your own particular circumstances, but this could work, or and I think I'm of the opinion that because we are not necessarily directly attacking, Democratic candidates, that the resistance will not be as much.
It's harder to fight against like policies that benefit the working class than it is to argue against like an individual, or it's super easy to like smear any individual and wipe them out and destroy their career or whatever. But if you have something like Medicare for all, or like you're saying that the child care, or things like that, like these programs that help millions of people, that it's much harder to discredit those ideas and those programs. Not that they won't try. Attempt to do that and try and even turn workers against their own interests, but it's much more difficult to do that than it is to smear or destroy any individual. Like that's easy. All you need is one scandal.
Yeah, I think also and also the scale, the battleground you fight on, shall we say, the scale at which you operate at is important here. Again, talking about how we talk about just decades of depoliticization, where most people's idea of politics is only stuff that happens often in politics is what politicians do.
Politics is when you vote, right?
Yeah. That's it. But it's also something that politicians often in Washington, D.C. do, and they're squabbling there. And that is what, politics is only something that they care about because you vote for federal office holders every so many years. I think part of and so I think, and I think even like other third parties, Green Party, Workers for Working Families Party and stuff too, there's still such a focus on the national level. And which is, as we've learned the hard way, because of continually running up against that wall, that's if not necessarily a dead end, that's probably not the most productive use of the mass of your resources, because the opposition is way too strong. However, thanks to our lovely federal system, all of the battles that need to happen on the state and regional level are kind of like terrain that need to be rediscovered and reworked on, and stuff like universal child care, universal preschool is something that, because you're not fighting against national party holders, you might be able to you have to reconfigure how you work a little bit, of course, but you might be able to get more in. Mm-hmm. I have friends who did a lot of work on those campaigns, and I helped out a little bit. Well, my cat and I helped out collecting signatures here, so we're rather partial to that.
Did you count how many you got versus how many your cat got?
No, I would have lost.
I got more, right?
Yeah, because of I live in a residential area of the city that has a good amount of foot traffic, and so I had at one point to collect signatures. Also, we found out that having volunteers collect signatures in different places were a far more productive use of time and money than hiring professional signature gatherers, because we knew where we needed to go, and you could get do what I did, which is get my little folding card table that I used to record podcasts on until pandemic happened and we can't record podcasts in real life anymore. Put that outside on the sidewalk, and I set up here with got my clipboards and all my pens and masks and hand sanitizer and a sign, and I'd sit out there, and my cat Leo, who is a large mix, that he's partially Maine Coon, which means he's a large, very floofy, very big vocal cat. Yeah, he's a big cat, but whose main job is to kind of patrol his little section of the sidewalk and demand attention. So people would always stop by, because Portlanders love something like the amount of Portland folks who have pets is something like far more than those who have children. So other Portland folks would stop by and pet him. And while they were there petting him, and Leo was just actively meowing at them, telling them about his day, I would hit them up for like, hey, have you heard about this campaign? And get them like, oh no, I haven't. What, yeah, I'll sign on for that. And so there we go. And that was one of the ways to do it.
Yeah.
I think other convention aspects are, let's see, there's everything from like, I mean, the eternal specter of like, how do you vote for a national representative board is in there. That is one of those things where I think that apparently was quite the drawn out. It was a drawn out fight and just heavy procedural argument 2 years ago. I guess it was, I missed a lot of it yesterday, but I guess it was the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's stuff to, a lot of it is stuff to expand the international roles. Some folks are pushing resolutions to that, make sure that we don't have, the no spy zone, that we don't have like active intelligence officers, as members, and a couple other things. To flip this around, what have you guys seen of it so far, or at least from what's supposed to come up this week that you've been looking forward to?
I mean, I'm definitely interested in the labor resolution, kind of pushing towards, building a national labor strategy within DSA. That's unfortunately seems to have been not as emphasized as I would like.
Yeah.
In most years, but beyond that, it's mostly the international stuff. I mean, we actually had on this program just not long ago, Austin Gonzalez, who was just on the delegations to both Peru and to Venezuela, and just building DSA into being an organization that is engaging with the working class entities and socialist political parties broadly, like across the country, and having that develop in the heart of empire is significant. That's something that I'm very proud of this organization for having for being a part of.
That's great too. Robert, any comment? Or are you still there?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I don't know. It's hard. Like Jeff and I kind of go back and forth on this a lot. I think that the DSA needs to be, and I think we're in a good place. At least I can only look at it through the lens of New Orleans DSA. But there's always going to be people who are like super hyper involved in like the DSA and love like the nuts and bolts, and they love like Robert's rules and all that. And I know it's kind of a meme, like don't trust socialists who don't like who love meetings. So I think there always needs to be, you're grooming, people who are actually going to be professional politicians. But there also needs to be a strong contingent of, like, as my wife Erin says, I actually am the working class, so I just need you to tell me where you need me to be.
Yeah, I think that's at some point that was and I think that was the one of the beautiful things about the Bernie campaign is that the role in terms of just, I mean, I used to I'm an out of work engineer, got laid off 2 weeks ago, but what of the project work, there was a lot of, I think there's a lot of great, not just things you can learn that corporate America has poured billions into understanding how it works, but I think there are certain things that we can glean from kind of like companies' best practices as to how to set up projects and how to facilitate small group interaction. And it's one of those things that's kind of a thing where, hopefully people with better analytic minds than I, or at least have better sourcing and a lot more time, can go through and like figure out like, okay, what can we take from what they do but actually, put it towards put it towards ends that aren't just making money for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So, and one of the things is project structure. And I think one of the a couple things we have learned as we are in, as some folks, including Derek Varn, have described it as the burnout, BERN, of when you get a bunch of activists and socialists together. If they do not have a project, they fight.
I just talked to Varn last night on Kenzo Shibata's show.
Yeah. Small world. I pop up. He's been on my show a couple times, and I popped up on a couple of his streams. The but I think the benefit of the benefit of the Bernie campaign, just beyond the kind of the obvious ones, are that it was a project or a campaign that had very delimited. It had you knew what had to happen. You knew what the end state, the win state was, what the goal was, but also you knew when when it was going to end, which was the big important thing, because if a lot more people were much more willing to sign up for the stuff if they knew, like, hey, we can canvass for Bernie because we know that these goal states, these goalposts that we have to hit, this one happens on this day, this one happens on this day, and then this one happens on that day, and then that's all we have to expend this amount of energy for, and then after that we can kind of relax a little, maybe do something in a different way. And for example, like so you had like a lot of people. It's like, all right, well, we know when the opening primaries were, so we know how to canvass now, and we know how to do texting now, and so they would there were ways that a lot of different people from different backgrounds with different amounts of energy and capacities they could plug in at different levels to contribute to this goal. But then a pandemic happened, and both the the Democrat and Republican parties wanted to kill their voters by voting during pandemic, and so we know how that happens.
Yeah, it keeps happening too.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of people who get really, I don't know. I think there's something I've noticed where people who like read. Let's just say they read a little bit too much, and they read on the leftist 20th century leftist history a little bit too much, and it almost like if you read too much of it, is you get not quite black-pilled, but you will get much more pessimistic.
That's part of the Zinn problem, right? Like part of the Zinn problem is that like. There's a lot of accuracy to what like he's technically saying, but the focus of what he's what he looks into and what he reads into is a lot of the most like crushing defeats of the left in the history of the of the in the United States. I think you like keep plugging our past guests, but we've had Harvey K on this program many times, talking about how he chooses to emphasize on. Some of the more triumphant and more radical components of the look, people like FDR definitely did do horrible things by like having, internment camps for Japanese Americans, but they also were the first people in this country that actually constructed something of a social democratic safety net. Right. Yeah. And like, that is not as a solution to, like, that is not a revolution necessarily, but it is a transition. It is a change to make things like less fucking shitty.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's complicated because like you can't just be so strident in your thinking in terms of like how you're gonna like push. How are you gonna like have the most perfect moral like politics or whatever and. I don't know. I get really frustrated when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like we could get into a whole conversation about the New Deal and like, is it good or is it bad or whatever? But like, that's completely pointless, right?
Yeah, you can read a lot of. We even read stuff like Paul Maddox Sr., who was writing essays called like the New Deal, like in 1939, criticizing all of the labor concessions and all of the constraints that put on.
Like none of that is untrue.
Yeah. But it's just interesting to see. Yeah, it's interesting just to see, like at the time, what members of the CPUSA at the time were like how did they thought everything was going on? Like what were their critiques of in the moment, much less. After everything, and like after during the post-war era where everything changes. But I think but the kicker about pessimism is that that I don't like it. The two heavy online tendencies that I dislike intensely are, let's just say, extreme pessimism, but also contrarianism. But we could do a show about the latter, a whole other show. But I think part of the kicker is that there is something that constrains your perspective about what is possible, but what is likely. That reading all of the, reading all these the history of the left of the last century, and like all this lost and all, everybody getting killed or bombed out or everything going wrong. A lot of places are, giving up and buying houses and getting de-radicalized. That kind of like, I think it screws with the perception about what can be or what could be or what is going to be. Because I think too much of your mental models of how you think the world kind of works, I think they get they get bent in certain ways by what history books, well, even, left history books will tell you about. It's one of those things where no one could have predicted that, there would be this mass uprising in the middle of a global pandemic in 2020, to the point where it wasn't just based in a few cities. It was in every city, there were more than like 1,200 BLM demos across the planet. Mm-hmm. And at least, like I said, it's how that will reverberate from here on out. I don't think anybody knows, but it's something that there were a lot of missed opportunities. But at least this was something that happened that nobody could call. Where even like pessimists like Matt Christman were like went to one of those demos and was like on a stream afterwards, like talk about how it brought him to tears just to see that this amount of people, this kind of
Matt cracks me up because like he's a pessimist, but he's like a softie too.
Yeah. Just crying, but talking about how, and like just ripping into people who were saying like, this was not, this wasn't a revolutionary working class movement. It's like, what the F is up with you people? Get in the damn streets. There are millions of people in the streets. Get in there now.
His big thing is finding meaning in life. Like it's become very, very simple.
Yeah. I think something makes me wonder, I think not having a day. I think that's one of those outlooks of both continued psychedelic use, but also having having day jobs you can't identify with, or correction, not having day jobs, rather having work, because there's a difference between. What's that?
That's alienation. That's what alienation is. Yeah.
But to quote my old philosophy professor who actually just passed, the great Fritjof Bergman, who started up the New Work, New Culture Center, talked about how most people, their view of work is like this alienating thing, because we only see work as through, as a day job, through the job system. Whereas he's like, if you ask somebody about their day job, they're kind of like, it's not too good. I do this to keep the lights on. But if you ask somebody about it's a living. If you ask somebody about their life's work, however, that flips it. Because at some point, productive labor, and I think some of the stuff comes out of like a lot. He was a lot of like Fritjof was doing a lot of like post-Marxist stuff, but he talked about how that work could be one of the most thrilling, most life engaging, life giving things you could ever possibly do. But the question is with meaning, and the great example of this is whenever the Midwest floods. And it was, because I can remember, especially this happened because I was a massive college hockey fan. Right after the championships, I think it was the North Dakota team, and North Dakota had a great hockey team. They'd have to like immediately fly home because all the players were needed on the front lines to fill sandbags to defend, to build levees to defend against the river. And interviews with these people who were out there, they would talk about how this would be like, again, this was like the most thrilling, most fulfilling thing that they'd ever done in their life, was just, working together collectively on this. I mean, what would have been normally an alienating, mind-numbing task, but they worked on it together to solve this problem. And it was one of the most thrilling things in their life. It's kind of, it's the search for meaning, as opposed to, say, I think it was Dostoevsky who wrote about how, like, in Russian prisons, like it's one of the things that the the prisoners would have to do would be like either picking up rocks from one pile and put them up on another, or like, you know, picking up things of sand from one pile and put it on another. It's kind of like how alienating that is versus some very similar tasks of, you know, earthworks, but the meaning is far different.
Yeah, if you're doing that for self-preservation or protection of your family or your community or whatever, you know, the people that you love and that you care about, regardless of how you like define that or how you like label it or whatever. Yeah. Like that's much more meaningful than, you know, the purely 100% totally alienated sense of like you do this because, you know, the prison guard literally is making you do it because if you don't do it, there'll be a punishment. Like that's the difference.
I can give you a hard example of I guess what you're talking about is like when we had our first wave of coronavirus, like I wasn't black-pilled at all. Like I was totally like, oh, I'm gonna build a garden. I'm gonna like we live in New Orleans anyway, so it's always good to have like, you know, this isn't even like a crazy food hoard or something. This is, you know, at worst, this is going to be my hurricane preparedness kit. I've got stuff to filter water. The government's we're gonna shut this, you know, the whole country down. This is going to be like a complete reset button. Yeah, and it's going to be something we survive. But now it's like here we are on like fourth wave, and now it feels like, oh, we're just gonna just let people die and we're not gonna shut down. And right now I'm much more terrified because I don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
This feels way scarier. I have no purpose now.
Yeah, no way to plug in. No, it is akin to swimming in a lake of where you can't touch bottom and you don't know how deep it is. Where at some point there is this free floating anxiety, literal free floating anxiety. That's rough. That's the one of the things up in Portland that we've had to do is, well, we've had about 4 or 5 natural disasters up here, more than usual. Not to mention the uprising where once a lot of like mutual aid groups started kicking off in March or April of last year, then the uprising happened, and then there were some more. Then there were some of the groups started forming to help support the protests, because in Portland, infamously, I guess, there were more than 100 nights of protests. Then the fires came. And so you had all of these mutual aid groups, DSA, like some of the Wobblies helped out too, even like local churches and kind of like just kind of like ad hoc, well-meaning people throwing things together, had to pivot on a dime to figure out like, okay, we now have most of the West Coast is on fire, and there were days in Portland. I mean, Portland alone, not to mention all the stuff that was going on in Central California or even Central Oregon, but in Portland, where the smoke was over, where like they had to invent new colors for the air quality index meter because they had ran out of the respective before they had run out, and there were days I can remember looking at it where the AQI was like over 400 or 500. And so a lot of people had to immediately like, okay, now what we do is like immediately you had to like turn on a dime from doing pandemic and protest support to like, okay, hey, we need box fans and furnace filters for people, and like cardboard and duct tape so people can build their own like in-house air filter system. We need to like go to your local Airgas and okay, hey everybody, I'm going to Airgas. Can you guys Venmo me money and I'll buy respirators and KN95s and then go distribute that.
Oh, looks like we just got raided by Kenzo. Welcome to the Good Morning Comrade show. We have Jeremy on the show from Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person, Jeff and Robert. What's going on?
Welcome in, everybody.
Smash that follow button. Smash that subscribe button if you want to give us a little bit of cash to keep the show going too, by the way. But yeah, we're talking about really, we're kind of getting into a lot of like Galaxy Brain stuff here. But you want to continue on? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to acknowledge all.
Not a problem. Yeah, I always welcome. I always thought that was weird that that transferring users on Twitch was called a raid, because you're not raiding anything. It's a cascade. You're cascading your users to the next place. And then
we're bringing people in. We're I don't know what you want to call it, but hey, we got some followers. Thank you, Audie. Off the
guys are so silly. It's MMORPG. speak.
Yeah.
That's why.
Gamified.
You gotta do it's like wrestling. You gotta do here we talk the video game speak.
Mhm. Yeah, it's memes. It's just memes. Oh, we got Starlight Eyes here as well. But anyway, I'm sorry. Continue, Jeremy.
Oh no, not a problem. Let me just mute that. Okay. But to connect this, connect both. Well, let me finish the terms about this is the for those folks of you just joining me. I'm a podcaster based in Portland, Oregon. You may or may not have seen me once again. Occasionally popping up on either Derek Varn stuff, or once in a while I will help out or comment on the excellent show that I think every single one of you should subscribe to called This Is Revolution, hosted
we love this Revolution here.
Yeah.
Jason and Pascal are fantastic.
Yeah, hosted by Jason Miles and the great Pascal Robert. If you want a really fun thing to do is go to the archives of Majority Report and watch the couple of segments where Pascal Robert is on Majority Report, just laying it down, like everything from
on 80. Oh my god, dude! I actually streamed, like I did a live React Andy type thing to that. Like as he talked about it, it just like the way that Pascal delivers like all of this info in this like very like clear, succinct way, but like completely and like utterly no bullshit, and like completely and utterly authoritatively. Like the dude is a absolute like gift from God, like a wealth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why it was kind of thing when I first started listening to the show back in. I think the first episode I heard was like back in like November. I think it was when Derek Varn went on. I'm like, wow, this is a really cool show. So I started checking out the other stuff, and it's like I think once and then subscribed, and then it's like, yeah, it's at one point you want to once it got into its modern form in just a few months, it's something that like you want to like spam all your friends like, dude, let's watch this. This is kind of like you have like takes of like just vital history of
life. Rajman's on there all the time too, talking.
Yeah.
We love
great stuff. But anyway, but just to finish up the talking about the last year of life in Portland is, so we had the wildfires going on there, and we were able to, that was a couple weeks, and most people were able to survive, although there was plenty of some real nasty stuff happen where all the 3% types who are in Central Oregon and East Oregon were kind of a thing where they would because they're in full on, this was during the high moral panic. Antifa is coming for your daughter. Freak out where they would have like, they're coming to this town, and you heard all these stories happening in the Pacific Northwest. So they were actually like putting out roadblocks in a couple of these roads because they heard that like Antifa were coming, and which also kind of like stymied rescue efforts and wildfire prep efforts, because they'd hear on the radio agents and federal officials saying BLM, and they thought that Bureau of Land Management meant Black Lives Matter. They said, oh man, BLM is in town, so yeah, we gotta go fight them and such.
So hard.
But anyway, so a few months later, things kind of quiet down relatively due to once the winter hits, and then early February, then we get the ice storm right before it hits Texas, and in Oregon, because for a bunch of different reasons, mainly because the utility company refuses to bury its power lines. So Portland is a city where where all of our power lines are like up high, which means when you have an ice storm, which you now have record power outages everywhere, because power lines are not built to be to carry that much weight in ice. And so that everybody had to like reactivate all of their mutual aid groups almost immediately, try to help people focus on that, to the point of where you now have everything from like groups called Potato Block that are all about like cooking mass amounts of potatoes and other foods for people for like free distribution during emergencies, to like little groups of lumberjacks who are working on securing, like acquiring, chopping, drying, and setting up firewood caches around town, so that once when the next major storm hits, we have ways to distribute firewood to people. That and I'll bring this back to the DSA convention, and that there's actually one of the panel workshop meetings this week. I'm disappointed that there's only like 2 on mutual aid. I wish there was a lot more, but there's actually is a panel called something like, how to use mutual aid as like a recruitment tool, and that is the thing of like, one of the things that you can get people out there to join in on your cause is to help provide. It is. A lot of people bring up the Black Panther Party about the kind of stuff that they did, and I think sometimes there's a little bit too much of a romanticization with that. But I mean, we're like modern Americans, of course. Everything is romanticized.
John, by the way, he's from Baton Rouge, formerly of New Orleans chapter, has talked about. He's talking about how it's been a great recruitment tool doing mutual aid events for the Baton Rouge chapter of DSA. It's a great way to bring people. It's a great way to help people. It's a great way to sort of build your network.
Oh yeah,
and it's like, when you think about it too, like there's been, and this is something that's been going on since at least 2019, when we first started doing 2018, I guess, when we started doing Great Light clinics here. Where's like this question of, is doing mutual aid like doing charity work or something like this? And we've discussed that a lot on this program, and we've sort of dispensed with a little bit of those arguments. But do you want to kind of jump on with that?
Yeah, and I'll say this out front that I am not an anarchist. I describe myself as,
by the way.
Yeah, I don't know, vaguely. I'm a vaguely drunk Marxist. How about that? But the thing about mutual aid, especially in that it's not charity, because charity, it relies on maintaining power hierarchy. Charity relies upon it is the largesse of Bezos, the almighty Bezos. God, there's a lot of. I'm surprised no one has come up with a Zardoz joke or riff.
Bezos is close enough already to Zardoz as a name, so you don't need to even make a joke about it. It's just too on the nose.
Yeah, that's this flying statue head of this bald guy. The Amazon is life. The
giant flying dick going out into space for 11 minutes.
Yeah, the rocket penis is life. The gun brings death, or what? I can't remember how the line goes. But if you haven't seen it yet, go see the film Zardoz, just to see what pre-Star Wars Hollywood science fiction, English science fiction starring a bikini-clad Sean Connery looks like.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, but mutual aid is different from charity, because again, mutual aid is much, as opposed to like having playing on the being an entirely moralistic thing of like this kind of like of the comfortable folks. There we go. There's Sean Connery about to give a lecture on the history of mutual aid.
Revolver and the boots are perfect, honestly, and the straps of the bullet straps, I just love it.
Yeah, double matching
hair, the mustache, like everything is perfect.
Yeah, double matching bandoliers. The 70s were a heck of a time. But mutual aid is the thing of like, it is not kind of like rich people like donating down or anything. It is it's like us giving to us, or at least it's much more horizontal. It's kind of a thing of like trying to at some point, not self-reliance, I guess. I am very bad at articulating these things because I don't think I've ever actually been asked to.
Working class helping itself is what mutual aid is.
I think you're fine, dude. I think you're doing a
not doing a bad job at all.
Yeah, it's just like I look at it as this, and I need to do more of it, and I'm not good at it mostly because I like to play video games and like goof around. I like to enjoy life, but I think all this like mutual aid stuff, honestly, is a trial run to where like the end of capitalism, and it might not be in our lifetime, but we can show the next generation like, hey, when things fall apart, because they will, it's going to happen. You can see it. This is how we're going to protect the most people.
Yeah,
and crash the plane with as few casualties as possible.
We got to get John's ass on this show pretty soon, but he says, yeah, the Underground Railroad was mutual aid. You use your own ability to flee others and help along the way. That's 100% true. And one of the things that like we learned, at least throughout like the brake light clinics in New Orleans, and it's like, again, we're not kidding ourselves in saying that like mutual aid is everything of all the thing. It's not like a replacement for like taking the power away from the capitalists or anything like that. But like what it does do is it provides relief for people in an immediate sense, and plus the like in a like strictly developmental sense, like it is a very easy thing to plug new people into DSA and put them in charge of something that they can essentially claim ownership of. They can essentially establish some experience, become essentially veteran organizers to a certain extent, and move on to something a little bit different. It's a very good thing to get people involved in as a first project. Kenzo says, I think mutual aid is going to look very different depending on your location and the local politics. Of course.
You got that right.
Different needs.
That's one thing I wanted to put together, like a little ad hoc like last minute meetup of like, just like little like 2-hour mutual aid chat for people in the convention that of like talking about how, because I think in Pac Northwest we have wildfire, we have actually we got volcanoes and Nazis and wildfires. Y'all have hurricanes, and then up in the north, back in my home state of Michigan, you have bad water, and you also have snowstorms. So it's like, everybody the earth is trying to kill us all but in slightly different ways. And some of them is also the effects of the last 200 years of our political economy now coming to bite us in the ass. So,
yeah. And here's Kenzo again, like in some areas, there's have standing institutions that provide mutual aid. We have to either work in coalition with those institutions or find bigger ways to fill in with groups. But there are places that there's no aid work, or all that aid work is done by churches. Exactly. And
correct.
And the fact that churches are doing it is not a bad thing either. But like, it is an opportunity to sort of build ties in the working class again, like I'm interested in building an organization when it comes to like DSA and stuff. And in order to do that, you need to get people experienced in organizing projects, right? And by doing that, like by giving something that is like easily replicable, something that there is no need, there's no like horizon on which like the need for mutual aid is going to go away. Yeah. So like this is something that is almost, it's replicable to the point where it will never end. So it is a great perpetual starting point for bringing people into your organization.
Indeed. And as the aforementioned Pascal Robert again has even quizzed DSA members on the air before in very not quite tense, but very kind of pointed and almost
in a very Pascal way.
That very Pascal ways about like why are more DSA folks not involved with like Black churches, and which is an extremely good point.
They're critical parts of communities, like super important.
Yeah. And it's also, but it's kind of a thing of like, I think one of the downsides of the left coming out.
Sorry, hold on a second. Starlight Eyes gave 20 tier 1 subs, gifted 20 tier 1 subs. Holy shit. Thank you so much.
Sweet.
Man, you are the man. That's wow. Like that's so awesome. I don't even know how to put into words right now.
Yeah. Considering that we've had 2 subs, okay, so we had 2 subs prior to Starlight Eyes. One is Cladonius, one is Starlight Eyes, and then 20 gifted subs by Starlight Eyes. Like, mad fucking props to you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh no, that's fine. It's kind of these are the things you got to do to keep the lights on. The comment from John. I was with one of NOLA's co-chair in a black neighborhood canvassing, and the conservative folks want to support the campaign to decriminalize sex work. Yeah, that was there you go. But also, I mean, it's a thing of like, and I think one of the historic mistakes the left has made because of for better or for worse, the new left got intertwined, maybe a little bit too much, with the counterculture. The counterculture was not a left thing at all, as any as we know now of just look into how reactionary hippies and new agers can be about, say, vaccines. But part of the but it was the thing. There was a definite break with all the church groups of the civil rights movement. It's one of those. It's like, heck, the people who the activists who broke into that FBI office to discover the COINTEL program. One of them was a member. I believe was a full-on member of like Catholic Worker. So.
Right. So.
Wow. And it's so it's one of those things of realizing because I think Derek Varnes pointed this out a couple times. It's like if folks are looking for examples of large non-state affiliated communities, socially strong and robust communities, you have to look at churches, because you have this entire network. I mean, it is much like with everything else, it's extremely complex, and you have to be strategic about who you interface with. But again, I live in Portland, where in neighborhoods where like every church has a pride flag sticker on the main church sign, and you had heck, one of the local churches would actually had a nativity scene, but fenced in with barbed wire.
Yeah,
and it's like we support migrants and immigrants on there, and like those are the kind of people. It's the same as like reaching out to well-meaning Bernie-crats as like an easy get, and to try to kind of like help kind of like you're tapping a balloon, just like very slowly tap. Hey, come work with us. We want to do this stuff, and all we want to do is say maybe we want to today we want to provide ice and water to the the heat waves were in Portland a few weeks ago, and just the amount of folks that were out doing like water runs and ice runs and food runs for like all of the tent cities that are everywhere was kind of astounding. I remember I went out there, and most of the by the time I'd gotten to most of the places in Northeast Portland that I would stop by, they had already been supplied by at least like two others, and just say, hey, do you guys I got waters and ice, you need anything? And they're like, no man, we got it, thanks. And just use that as a way to do so as a way to build the movement and to bring others into.
At the very worst in this scenario, you're helping somebody.
Yeah, at the very
worst. Even if you don't come into your movement, you like somebody who sleeps on the wherever at night doesn't have to be cold because they don't have a blanket.
Yeah. It's at least point if our efforts only say alleviate 10% of the suffering of a person for that week, that is at least that is a material benefit for them, and at least an improvement, an incremental improvement, yes, but at least something that lets them live for a little bit longer, and maybe gives them the potential of trying to get into something a bit more stable.
Totally 100%. Well, I think we're gonna have to start wrapping. I have school in the morning, so I gotta get to bed. But giving the mic to the wrong person. It sounds like tonight we gave the mic to the right person, actually.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, people ask me what the name of the show is for, and it's like, well, because first I named it because one of my favorite bands is The Replacements. And doing things that, shooting yourself in the foot with a shotgun because it's funny is very appealing to me, which The Replacements were extremely famous at. And so there was, so I use that name just because I thought it was funny. And I always have to explain this to people. Yeah, I'm the wrong person. Give them, give them, what happens when you give the mic to me. Anyway, you can find my show. It's called Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person. We're at soundcloud.com/giving the mic. On Twitter, it's at Giving the Mic. Like with every other left pod, we do have a Patreon. We are supported by listeners like you at patreon.com/giving the mic, Facebook/giving the mic. Also, check out This Is Revolution. Please subscribe to that if at all possible. If you haven't yet, subscribe to these guys, but most of you already probably have. And that's my. If you have any questions or comments for me, please you can email me, givingthemic@gmail.com. Also, but yeah, we're stuck in the middle of the 2021 DSA National Convention. We'll see what other hijinks and interesting developments come from there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to thank you guys a lot for being open to kind of more or less kind of like thrown together last minute chat.
Absolutely, and like we have to have you back on real soon because this was a blast. I had a great time. I don't know.
Yeah,
hope you did too.
Yeah, it is rare that I get a chance to be the guest. I'm usually in host mode when I do these things.
Well, I mean,
share your role.
And yeah, just what's last word from John. Build community too. We talking about mutual aid. Folks got comfortable enough to tell us that we got rice and beans 5 days a week, and we never did it again. It took months, but that's trust, real trust. There you go. Yeah, John's doing great work. We love John, and he's a delegate as well in convention, and he's one of the real good ones.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's another, and then there's a whole.
Even if he's from Atlanta, we still like him.
And I mean, there's also something where you'll get certain segments who will say that like mutual aid is somehow like they don't see how it's building socialist power, and I mean, I guess the difficulty is like to respond patiently to them. It's like, well, it's just kind of like, yes, it is, and here's how. But anyway,
it's I don't have a lot of time for those kinds of arguments. But anyway, thank you so much again for coming on, Jeremy. Have a great night. As for who we were gonna raid Kenzo, but we went a little bit long. But this is fantastic. But who we're gonna get? I see Amy C3 is on. Let's go ahead and raid her. Everybody have a great night. Thank you so much. We love you. Good.
Bye. Nice meeting you. Good night.
Bye. I get to sleep too. Buku tired.
Night.
And there we go.